Does your partner threaten to hurt you or a loved one? Are you told that you're worthless, belittled in front of others, prevented from having access to money, isolated from friends or family, verbally and physically abused, or worse? Watch today's show if this describes your situation or that of someone close to you. Maybe you will find the strength to identify your situation and seek help. Today we'll be talking to a woman whose daughter was killed by her partner, a man whose partner stabbed and nearly killed him, and an expert who can tell us how to identify when we are in an abusive relationship. But before we start, a famous Australian singer, Colleen Hewett, lived through a violent relationship many years ago, and this song is from her new #1 album, Black and White, and is being used as a symbol for recognition of domestic violence. Here's a short clip of it.
You can stand there and yell, argue the point till it freezes in hell. But I'm just gonna scream, 'cause you don't understand what I'm saying or mean. I'm just gonna scream. I'm just gonna scream.
Hi, I'm Sally Ann, and I'm a clinical psychologist, wife, and mother of 4. This show is providing Australians with a platform to share their lives with other Aussies in order to inform, educate, and inspire. Kerryn Robertson, mother of Rekiah O'Donnell, who was only 22 years old when her boyfriend shot and killed her in October 2013. Rekiah had been a victim of domestic violence for the previous 14 months. So thank you so much for joining us on the Sally Ann Show, Kerryn. I appreciate you being here. First of all, tell us a little bit about Rekiah. Who was she?
As a child, she was really outgoing, bossy of her younger siblings. Yeah.
You said she's the oldest of 3,
Yes.
so, and close in age to her brother.
Yes.
So, yeah, a bossy young girl.
They were only 19 months apart, so yeah, he was a little brother, so yes, very bossy.
Yeah. And so when she grew up, she started dating people, I guess, and at some point she met Nelson Lay at work, was that right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what you know or knew, I guess, about their relationship.
I actually didn't know anything to begin with. I didn't know that she'd even met him. We didn't know for about 5 months about him at all.
Yeah.
I had heard that he came into the store where she was working and proceeded to look her up on social media afterwards and got her number.
Okay, and so then he started to see her, he started to go out with her. Did she live at home at the time, or was she?
No, she was living in a share house at the time, so yeah.
Oh, so you didn't get to find out much about their relationship.
No.
So what do you know about it now? What do you know? Do you know if there were any signs in the beginning? Do you know what happened during the course of their relationship?
Yes, we know, yeah, through the trial that we've just had and through friends of hers that it was abusive right from the word go, basically, right from the first date. That it was, yeah, he was wanting to know well, they had a double date, I think, and he was saying that she was looking at a friend of his, and yeah, so right from the first date there was that jealousy there.
And I think I read somewhere that he'd been tracking her as well, tracking her phone, was that right?
Yeah, there was lots of, we heard that he was tracking her phone and knew even when she moved house where she'd gone to. Yeah.
So had they broken up? Is that what
they had an on-off relationship as far as I can see. We moved her away from where she was living in the share house to be near us, so that she could be away from where he knew she was, but she told us that he had tracked her.
Okay, so you knew at some point, did she tell? Is that how you found out? Because I wasn't aware of that you moved her out for some reason. So what did she say to you?
In the beginning we noticed bruises and she just passed them off as bumping into something. It wasn't till later on, I think, till we saw something else that she confessed. We knew that he was a friend at that stage, but she confessed that he'd been abusing her. So that was in about probably January, February, the year that she died.
Yeah. So you noticed the bruises, and she must have eventually told you. Is that what happened? Or?
Yeah, she confessed that he'd been hitting her.
Yeah. And that she wanted to get away.
Well, there was various. Yeah, she wanted to be away from him, but couldn't afford to live where she was anyway. She'd lost her job as well at that stage. So
So then the worst thing happened. Tell us about that. So how did you find out? What was the next step?
Well, I actually found out. I was on my way to work, and I heard it on the midday news that there'd been a shooting that day in the street where he lived.
And did you know at that point?
I guess I kind of did, but yeah, tried to pass it off as in that particular suburb there are a lot of crimes. It could have been anyone.
So you heard on the radio before you got a call.
Yeah.
It seems to be the way these days. I'm really sorry to hear that. That must have been a real shock to you and to your family. After that, what did you think? Did you know what had happened? Did you know who it was? Did you realise what had gone on?
Yeah, I mean, it was a shock, but it wasn't. The abuse had got so bad. We did hear more that came out afterwards, but I actually said to her one day, you're going to end up either in hospital seriously injured or dead. I actually said those words to her at one stage when we had to go and pick her up from his place.
Wow, I'm really sorry for you, Kerryn. That's just unbelievable. One of the other things that I read in the media is that you have chosen to forgive Nelson Lay. Tell us what you mean by that, because it seems quite, anyone listening now is going to think that that's quite bizarre to forgive the person that killed your daughter. But can you explain that to us?
Well, it was a process, but I actually went to a seminar one day and he explained it as in to say that it's for your own benefit, not so much their benefit, because you then don't hold all that bitterness and anger inside of you. So I chose to forgive him, and I don't actually think about him that much. So it's like a release, that forgiveness.
Absolutely, that's what forgiveness is. It's not about saying that what they did was okay, because there is nothing okay about that. But what you're saying is that holding on to that anger inside you only hurts you. It doesn't hurt him. It doesn't hurt anyone else. It just hurts you. So good for you for choosing to do that. In light of everything that's happened, what would you like to see happen in the community? What would you like to, what changes do you think would be great to see in the community?
I think, cracking down on domestic violence to begin with. There's too many slaps on the wrist. Go away and do it again until you've done it 10 times, and then perhaps they do something. I know they're trying to make changes, but if intervention orders are broken, then they jail them. It's too easy to get away with it and just do it again until you seriously injure or hurt someone. And the statistics are only what we know. There's a lot that would go on behind closed doors that aren't even reported. But hopefully, if they bring punishment for people, then women and men who are abused even can report it and won't be too scared to report it because nothing will be done.
Thank you so much, Kerryn, for coming and being part of the show and helping us to put a spotlight on domestic violence. I really appreciate it, and I'm really sorry for your loss, genuinely sorry.
No worries.
After the break, we'll meet a man who was lucky enough to survive serious physical assaults by his partner, the mother of his children. You won't want to miss this.
You say that you care as you rant and you rave with your hands in the air. But you don't have a clue that the way that I'm feeling is not about you.
In doing research for this show, I think that we previously all believed that domestic violence was typically a woman being abused by a man. However, this is not always the case. So I wanted to introduce you to Simon Lanham, who lived with his violent, abusive ex for 5 years before she went that extra step and tried to kill him with a knife and left him with extensive injuries. So thanks for being here, Simon. I really appreciate it.
No
So
worries.
tell us a little bit about your relationship from the beginning. How did it start?
We lived across the road from each other,
Okay.
and we became friendly, and then we became friendlier,
Yeah. And then start a
and
relationship.
eventually we moved into it
Yeah.
with each other. And
Yeah. Well, so what were the signs then of of it being an abusive relationship? Were they from the very beginning, or?
I've never been in an abusive relationship before, so I wasn't really aware of any signs to start with until
Yep.
I guess the verbal abuse started.
Okay.
And
So what was the verbal abuse like? Was it small things or big things?
yeah, well, it starts small and grows big, usually, doesn't it?
Yeah. So you realised it. At what point did you realise? Because you said that you were together for 5 years. What point did you realise that it was an abusive relationship?
Yeah, good question. Probably not for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I think when the first police involvement came along.
Okay. What happened? Was it a physical assault?
Yeah, she chased after me, and as I was trying to leave, we had an argument. I walked out. She chased after me. She jumped on my back, and she bit me right there on that. It's I don't know, a tendon or a ligament or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really hurts.
Yeah, I bet it does. Yeah.
And you know, I pushed her off and held her down and walked out the door and forgot my car keys. So she rang the police and told them that I'd tried to strangle her.
Okay. So they came, and were you arrested?
They found me sitting against the wheel of my car because obviously I couldn't leave.
Yeah.
They said, you know, we'll go in and talk to her, and they left an officer with me, and they came back after they'd talked to her, and they said it was really serious. She had lots of marks on her neck, and I said to the officer, are the marks vertical or horizontal? And he said, what does that matter? And I said, well, how, you know, if the marks are vertical, how would I leave vertical marks on her neck? And he sort of went, well, that's a good point. And he goes, well, how did they get there? And I said, she put them there by going like that to say it was me. And he went back and confronted her about it, and she admitted that
Wow.
she'd done it herself to make it look bad.
Wow. So that was the first physical sign for you, and obviously we'll talk about in a minute that things obviously got worse and repeated. But how was that for you being a man? Because I imagine that it would be hard to talk to. We women, in some ways, are quite lucky, depending on who it is. But we often have friends that we talk to about things if we feel confident enough to do that. But being a man, talking about your girlfriend or partner hurting you, is that something that was difficult to discuss?
Not really for me. I don't really get into the machismo side of being male.
Yeah.
I'm quite happy to talk about anything with anyone, really.
Yeah.
But I found that nobody wanted to hear about it.
Okay.
Nobody cared.
Do you mean family and friends, or do you mean
Well,
government?
I couldn't tell my family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, they didn't care except for Mum, really.
Yeah.
And I don't, you know, I've put her through enough trouble already in life to give her extra stress that she doesn't need to know about.
Yeah.
But yeah, nobody wanted to know. You know, it's not a thing. I'm sure you've seen the videos on the internet. In public, they have a man abusing a woman.
Yep.
People run in from everywhere. They have a woman physically abusing a man. People stand there and laugh.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing with domestic violence. I think we often think of it just being women, and you know, the reality is that there are men as well involved in here. Not just men, the perpetrators, but men, the victims as well. And so it's really more a person thing as well. Albeit that there's more women than men, but there are men too, and we need to make sure that we have facilities and the ability for men to have help, to seek help. Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. So what would you like to see change in the community then for men?
Men don't want to engage in the domestic violence debate because it's a gender debate at the moment, and it's got nothing to do with gender. Yeah. Violent people are violent people, and until that's accepted and recognised and put out there, nothing's going to happen, because it's not a one-sided thing. It's not all men against women. Men don't want to know about it because we're sick of being blamed for something we haven't done. And I mean, you'll find that 99% of men are disgusted by a man hitting a woman.
Absolutely, as they should be.
Yet, if you look at the TV, we're all out there hitting women, apparently.
Yeah. Look, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you very much, Simon, for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it. So tonight we've seen two serious and tragic outcomes of domestic violence, but after the break, we're going to chat to an expert who can tell us about the signs and what to do if we find ourselves in one of these types of relationships.
Have a clue. You don't have a clue. So shut up and let me breathe. Shut up and let me You say that you care as you rant and you rave with your hands in the air. But you don't have a clue.
Emily Maguire is a CEO at the Domestic Violence Resource Centre Victoria, which is a statewide not-for-profit organisation providing training, research and publications for those working with family violence survivors. Emily has worked in addressing violence against women for many years, both in government and the community sector, and she's a regular presenter and public speaker on issues around violence and how it can be prevented. So first of all, I just wanted to know a little bit about the statistics on domestic violence in Australia.
In Australia?
In Australia.
Yeah, sure. So the Australian Bureau of Statistics collects data every couple of years about the prevalence of violence against women and men in Australia through the Personal Safety Survey. In Australia, women are more likely to be victims of violence from someone they know. Men are more likely to be victims of violence from a stranger.
Yep.
Women's violence is likely to occur within the home and in the context of oftentimes a romantic or an ex-partnered relationship, whereas men are more likely to experience violence in public places, often on the street. So when it comes to sexual violence, 1 in 5 women have experienced sexual violence. 1 in 4 women have experienced emotional violence, and 1 in 3 women have experienced physical violence. Wow. And when it comes to violence that's perpetrated against men, actually 1 in 2 men have experienced physical violence. However, only 1 in 22 men have experienced sexual violence.
Wow, they're really like eye-opening statistics, really. And these are reported, or not? No, not necessarily for ABS.
No, so the personal safety survey is women's reports and men's reports of the violence that they've experienced over their lifetime. So it's since the age of 15. So it's an adequate picture of the lifetime prevalence of violence in Australia.
Okay. So let's just take a step away from that for a minute. In terms of relationships, can you tell us a little bit, or step us through what happens in a typical, if I know that there's no typical, but in a typical relationship, what might be some of the early signs of a domestic violent relationship?
Some of the early signs of domestic and family violence, and those terms are used interchangeably, are very often confused with signs of love or signs of emotion or signs of, feeling like you're in a really good positive relationship. So it would be things like the biggest risk factor and the thing to look out for is controlling behaviours. So often what they appear like in the very, very early stages of a relationship is your partner saying to you, oh no, don't go out tonight, stay at home with me, I want to see you. Or don't go and see your friends and family, I want to come out with you instead, I want to spend us time together.
Yeah.
So those are the sorts of things that women often experience, and often we don't, in hindsight we can say that was the start of a violent relationship, but often when you're in the middle of that situation, particularly, and this can be in the first 1 or 2 weeks of a relationship, or it can be in the first 1 or 2 years, there's no kind of typical sort of timeline around violence.
Yeah.
But often what we know is that women don't actually necessarily experience physical violence. Much of the violence that women experience is emotional, and it is something that escalates. So really what we talk about in the domestic and family violence sector is that violence is a pattern of power and control that is perpetrated most often by men over women.
Yeah. So what can we do then if we find ourselves in a situation like this, in a relationship such as this?
For women, I think in particular, the first thing is, if you think you're in a violent relationship, is to just make sure you're safe. Really, to do whatever it is that you need to do to keep yourself safe. If you feel like you might be a victim of violence, there are websites that you can have a look at, and there are people that you can talk to figure out whether or not you are in a violent relationship. But often there will be something that's in your gut that tells you that this is just not right. And women don't often put the label domestic violence to what they're experiencing, but often they know that they're not really in the sort of relationship that they want to be in.
Yeah, and what I've read just in the last week or so is about people who kind of think that he's really sorry, or she's really sorry.
Yeah.
They didn't mean it. It's not going to happen again. It was just a terrible thing that happened, and you want to forgive your partner. You want to believe them. That's what happens in a relationship. And I guess the reality is, if these behaviours are repeated, then that increases the likelihood of them being repeated and even escalated as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Violence in relationships often goes in a cycle. So you have a violent outburst, or you have a lead up to a violent outburst, you will have a violent outburst, then you have what's called the honeymoon period, where there are professions of apologies. There's, I'm sorry, I love you, I want to keep seeing you, I'll be on my best behaviour, I'll change, buy you flowers, whatever it is. And because women are in love with their partners, these are often men that we've chosen to live our lives with and have children with. Often then what happens is that we do take them back because we desperately want to believe that these men who we love and trust will change their behaviour. But actually what the research around men's behaviour change programs show is that often it's only about 30% of men who are actually able to change their behaviour in the long term.
Yeah. Look, thank you very much for coming on the show and telling us a little bit about domestic violence. I really appreciate it. And a huge thanks to all of our guests today. If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, please talk to someone and seek help when it's safe to do so. If you're in immediate danger, of course, please ring 000.
The way that I'm feeling is not about you. You don't have a clue. Shut up
Thanks again for watching the Sally Ann Show. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and we want your feedback. So contact us on our Facebook page and Instagram, or follow me on Twitter.